Welcome to Conversations with Creative Minds. We have been searching for the meaning of creativity and the role it plays in our daily life. People use creativity to express themselves in different ways, such as writing, painting, poetry, composing music, or innovating new products. Creative minds have never been more relevant than today because of the need to solve our society's dynamic and complex problems. Here with us today is Upton Bell, career broadcaster, interviewer, and author of Present at the Creation. Upton grew up with famous parents, surrounded by the notable people of the day. His father, Bert Bell, founded and owned the Philadelphia Eagles and was co-owner of the Pittsburgh Steelers. He created the Pro Football Draft and was the commissioner of football. Bert Bell is credited with making the NFL what it is today. His Broadway star mother, Frances Upton, saw the potential of the NFL and guided Bert Bell toward that goal. Upton has been a media presence throughout his career. He has interviewed all of the great sports legends, myriad authors, and U.S. presidents. Upton took over the Bay State Patriots in 1971 and had them renamed the New England Patriots. Upton Bell is an archive of sports and media knowledge with a prodigious memory. He is a Renaissance man in every respect. He is going to share his vast knowledge with us.
Well, the whole thing, as I see it, has the evolution of television, the technology, the cell phone, the computer, has all changed the way sports, and particularly football, which is the most televisable of all games, the natural start and stop of action, has now brought in a new generation, because you're seeing people more and more so than even watching it on live television are getting it on their phones, they're getting it on their computers. Streaming is the name of the game in the NFL now, Michael. And you're going to see more and more of it, to the point of why was the Super Bowl in both 2017 and 2020 in the middle of a vicious political campaign, along with basically the pandemic. It was a almost worldwide relief to watch a game, its pageantry, the halftime show, which has become as big as the game itself, major productions in there. It is really what show business, what a great Broadway play was like years ago. It's My Fair Lady being televised to millions of people, 114 million people here, and people around the world, because it is a communal experience. And one of the few left now, as I see it, because everything is split up. Network television, a lot of people don't watch it anymore. Most of the younger group that are coming up that watch sports, and the NFL in particular, are looking at it through the prism. Eventually, I think the day will come when you will see it on your watch. You can see it on your phone. So all of those things came together. And in the meantime, even before all of this, going all the way back, which we're going to do today, is the NFL has always been, with all the violence, the instant replay and everything else, the one national communal game. And look at it this way. When you listen to the broadcasters on particularly on television, the boom, the bang, the hitting, the blitz, the overhead artillery. Think of all of the military terms that are used in each telecast. Here comes the blitz. He's checking off. The only thing missing is one of the tanks arriving. So all of these things, I think the American psyche, and it's interesting, about 40 years ago, I'm doing an interview with Brent Musburger of CBS, and who really helped popularize it in the pregame and post-game shows, he said, Upton, he said, remember one thing about America. It's still the wild, wild west. He said, the frontier might have been closed, but there's still cowboys out there. And I honestly believe that. So even if you have a game, for instance, that's very, very boring. Now I have two sets on a Sunday. I watch the Red Zone. That's another change. The Red Zone is where you can see practically every play and it'll jump from game to game to game, even if you're watching the Patriots or a telecast of your favorite team. You can see in the Red Zone, it's like instant gratification, and you can keep up to date on that. You can get it on your phone. In the meantime, on the other set, I have the game on that I want to see. If you watch the Red Zone, the reality is that television has taken a game that has 32 teams. About 16 of them, I would say, if from my viewpoint professionally, you could lose tomorrow and you wouldn't lose anything. But it's become such a phenomenon. People will watch a game between the two worst teams in the league. Now, if that's baseball or basketball or hockey, they ain't watching. But it's football, they'll watch. Why? Who gets injured? Who gets hit? Who catches the long TD? The quarterback's on his back. The game calls. They bring you right up almost into the huddle. You can hear the guy yelling out, check off, A-10, 3. Think about this. The pilot getting ready to bomb. The commander calling in the artillery. Now that might sound way out there, but that's what you get. It's the constant sound and then the clash. Now I've been on the field during games for years. And I would say to myself, hard to believe if people heard what really went on down here, would they be turned off? Well, they can now hear that, and they're not turned off. And the camera can follow everything. And almost to the point of, at least from my viewpoint, the celebrations. I once said, it used to be if you made a good tackle, maybe your teammate would pat you on the back. Now it's like somebody's having an orgasm. It's ridiculous, but people love it. It's now show business. Quarterback of Tom Brady to Rob Gronkowski when they were here. Gronkowski, famous now for this big spike. Brady, which you never would do years ago. If you got a first down on an important drive, you wouldn't be doing what Brady does, which is he'll get the first down there, run up and go like this, which is right in the face of the defense. If you did that years ago, you get your lights punched out. But now, all of those elements come together. So now think back to what your original question was. 2017, 2020. What's the one day where you can celebrate? What's the one day where you invite people over, even though whether they had to have masks or even if you watch it alone due to the pandemic, and you see the spectacular halftime show, and you get great stars being isolated. It's it. It's Hollywood. It's what it has become. And for the younger generation, they've got their fantasy football. They're calling up and saying, did so-and-so get so many yards? Who caught the pass? Oh, do I have him on my team? And again, I'm back to streaming, phone, computer, to the point now where the NFL has made a deal. I mean, with I think it's Amazon Prime. I mean, I don't have Amazon Prime. I have no intention of getting it, but there are going to be a lot of people that get it to watch an NFL game. They've sold a package, so that's where they're going, and that's what we're going. Pageantry. The NFL now plays in London. Germany is going to be next. Paris, Rome, Red China is going to be there. Why? Not because they want to be, because it's a TV market. There are millions of people out there. And so that's where the game is gone. And that's the reason for my answer on your original question. First of all, I wouldn't enjoy it. I have a 61-inch screen. I want to see every play, and because I'm a student of the game. But the ordinary viewer, the young person that we're talking about coming along, the future of watching on television on sports, it's really evolved almost. If you go back, the first semi-televised game was actually in 1911 when Missouri played Kansas, and they tried an experimental way of taking the play-by-play and kind of flashing it up on a few screens and radios and stuff like that. But it was a football game. And then we evolved into 1921 and Pittsburgh, and a station still around today, a superstation called KDKA, and they actually did radio of the Pirates and the Phillies. And then it kept evolving, but it was always a thing of where you either sat at home with a few friends and you watched the complete game. You got up for halftime. People would come over for snacks. It was very, very communal, much more so than it is now. Now it's everybody for themselves. So it was a full day. And you would stay for the doubleheader, which the NFL instituted in the 60s. So you might watch the Patriots and say the Jets at 1 o'clock, and then at 4 o'clock you might have the Raiders and the Kansas City Chiefs, and then you have a night game on NBC, and then you have Monday night and Wednesday night, and on and on and on. But originally it was more of, I would call, a home setting. It grew into bars later on, but it was kind of a family thing, or you just sat there by yourself if you were just a football fan. So it went from that to what is now a movable feast. You went all the way through, and television, as it began to grow. And here's the interesting thing, because as a child, even though I was only 2 years old, I probably was there. In 1939, the World's Fair came to New York, and NBC decided that they were going to televise or attempt to televise the Philadelphia Eagles versus the Brooklyn Dodgers. Now, in those days, the Brooklyn Dodgers was a football team. It was not a baseball team yet. It was a baseball team. It wasn't called that. My father was the owner, head coach, and NBC came to him and to the NFL and said, we'd like to televise the game. The reason they want to televise it was the World's Fair had come to New York, and they had, RCA and NBC had a booth out there. And they had speakers and little screens all around the place, and they wanted something to exhibit. So what happened was the first televised game was because of the World's Fair, and my father's team participated in it. In fact, I just heard from the son of the father who played for my father's team in 1939 in that historic game. So it's what started out as an experiment then grew through the 40s, later on into the 50s. Bert Bell becomes commissioner in 1946. The first thing that he sees and what he has learned is that basically football, because he would watch baseball, he watched basketball, hockey wasn't big on TV then, but he saw with the natural breaks in the game after each play, with a halftime, with a 2-minute warning, all these different things in it, that it was perfect for television. It was really a studio game as he saw it. And that's what's his brilliance. He was really the father in many ways of modern TV. So what he did is, his first year as commissioner, he started to look at how to do television. The Cleveland Browns had gone to the Los Angeles and actually played at the Coliseum. And some of those games, particularly in the 50s, drew unbelievable ratings. So here's what he did. 1948 championship game in Philadelphia, played in a driving snowstorm with Bert Bell and his sons helping push the tarp off the field. The Cardinals were playing the Eagles on Saturday said, we're not playing in the game. If the weather is terrible, we're not going to do it. Bert Bell told them, you're going to play in the damn game because I have sold national television and radio rights. And he said, I don't care what happens, you're playing that game. Well, as it turned out, that was the beginning point of it. And then as we went along in the late 40s, in fact, NFL Films has done a whole thing on that, into the 50s, Bert Bell got the ingenious idea, which was copied later in 1970 by Pete Rozelle. But Bert Bell said, let's play a Saturday night game. Let's do it nationally. I've got a network called the Dumont Network. We'll put it on Saturday night under the lights. They even designed a white football with black stripes around it. And he said, let's see what happens. I'm telling you that it was incredible for its time. The ratings, people on Saturday night, it was appointment TV. And basically it became so popular that the colleges who played either on Friday with the high school games and Saturday afternoon, Saturday night, came to my father and said, look, we don't want to sue you, but we're asking you to help protect the college game, and would you discontinue it? Now, today, they'd have told them, bye-bye, boys. But he said, for the better part of the game, because the NFL really hadn't become the huge explosion that they are today, he agreed to back off. But in the meantime, again, one of the most prophetic and interesting decisions he made, he went to a league meeting and he said, gentlemen, what happens if a championship game ends up tie? And we have an obligation to play a game called the All-Star game in Chicago, which was bigger than any NFL game. The greatest college players versus the world champion NFL team. He said, what are we going to do? We're going to look ridiculous and say, basically, let's flip a coin? He said, every newspaper in America will make fun of us. The Giants won by a flip of a coin. So here we go. 1958. I'm there for history. Bert Bell's dream comes true. The Giants and the Colts. John Unitas drives them the length of the field. They kick a field goal. Goes into sudden death. The Giant players did not know the rule. Sam Huff said, well, I guess the game's over. We'll go to the locker room. And the official said, no. John Unitas, the great quarterback who became a legend from that game, said, we're going to overtime. So again, the Colts drive the length of the field, score a touchdown in overtime, and NBC carries the game. Well, America fell in love. That was the honeymoon. And basically, that single rule that he put in made the NFL start on its way to what it is today. What happened was in that game, back to television, the technical part of it is that basically they found out later on they lost the connection as they were about to go to overtime. And America is like holding their breath. They just watched this unbelievable comeback by the Colts. Now sudden death, which nobody really knew about. And basically, what we found out later on is NBC is in a panic, saying, here is our chance. So they sent, according to the story, they sent a couple of technicians down on the field. They didn't tell the officials that basically we're going to cause a furor down here to gain more time to get this damn thing back on the air. And actually were able to. They made some excuses, a riot in the stands, something else like that, gave them just enough time so when they're ready for the kickoff, because my father said, TV or not, we can't have these people sitting around here. They were able to get it back on the air for the kickoff. The Giants don't make first down. The Colts take it over and take it in. Still on its anniversary, the most talked about game in NFL history, made the game. And then into the 50s, it started to really, really go. And then into the 60s, the great Packers, the Colt teams that I was on, you could see it was going to be never ending. The game, Pete Rozelle, after Bert Bell died, knew how to sell it. Madison Avenue, New York, everybody got involved, advertisers. And then when Lamar Hunt founded the AFL and they came close, they had agreed on a merger in 1967 that basically one of his kids said, because the first game was not called the Super Bowl. It was called the NFL AFL championship game. But then Lamar Hunt said, one of his kids said to him, well, isn't that a Super Bowl? I mean, it's kind of funny how it happened. And so that's how the Super Bowl got named, and they were off and running. And of course, during that period of time, I was with the Colts. We were in the 68 Super Bowl that we lost to the Jets, which again made TV bigger because everybody said the AFL's a terrible league. Nobody's ever going to do anything. And then Joe Namath leads them to the second most famous game, where they upset us 17-point favorites. And even though it was a terrible loss for us, for the league itself, it was great because now the American public, who were non-believing up to that time, basically said, maybe that league does have something. Then the following year, the Kansas City Chiefs beat the Minnesota Vikings, and boom, then you got the merger in 1970, and we're off and running. And someday have robots. I mean, I'm looking at the brave new world out there. I think that he and she now, because women are becoming more and more part of the broadcast. Particularly, it's hard to break in football because of the attitude. You see it in basketball and other sports now. It's natural. You're going to see more of that. You have women officials in the NFL now. You have women coaches. You have a lot of things. What that broadcaster in the future is going to have to do is going to have to be aware of everything around him or herself. That not only are you speaking, and they always tell you when you're doing television, unlike radio, talk to the pictures, but don't over talk. And so I think the broadcasters of the future will talk less, but point out more. And eventually I see, and I've said this years ago, that the fan will participate this way. And I know they've been experimenting with it, which is basically that the fan will be able to guess what the play is, text it in or whatever way that they want to do it. It'll show up on the screen, and then they'll compare that to actually what the play was called. And then the fan will eventually be able to tell the coach what they think. Not that a Bill Belichick is ever going to listen to anybody. But with the whole idea of these, which were originally founded by Paul Brown, where he put in the 50s mini transistors in the quarterback's helmet so he could call the play, and my father made him take them out, is that basically now that every offensive and defensive play is called into either the quarterback or the middle linebacker on defense, that you're going to have the fan more involved, and that is, and we'll see how coaches and owners react to this. Will they be in the locker room before the game? Will they be in the locker room after the game? Will they be in the locker room during halftime? Now, the NBA's experimented with it. I don't happen to like it. And my reason is you take the mystery out of the game, you take too much mystery out of the game, and then there's nothing there. But basketball is experimented now. If you watch any of the championship games or the playoff games, you hear the coach's speech before the game. You hear what he has to say afterwards. And I'm saying to myself, in most cases, they're playing to the camera. I don't like that. But you're going to see, occasionally you'll see in the NFL the coach's speech before. In the case of like the Patriots, they'll show it Monday night afterwards, what the coach had to say. The players are around patting each other on the ass and all the other stuff. But it is going to become more and more invasive. And that broadcaster has got to be able to now. The difficult thing is if you're doing a broadcast, I did color on a lot of different games, football, basketball. You have constantly the director talking in your ear. And you got to be able to concentrate on the game and hear him say, go to replay, do this, do that. And you're like saying to yourself, my God, this guy's driving me or this woman's driving me crazy. But in the future, again, if you're the color commentator, you're going to have to explain the play, show the rerun, and then say, well, now we'll bring Michael Armanius in from Arlington. Michael, what'd you think of that play? And you'll say, oh, geez, that was a great play, or I would have called so-and-so. So you're going to have to be able to juggle all of that. We're not quite there yet. But what you have to understand is the broadcasters, the networks, NBC, CBS, ABC, Fox, Amazon Prime, all of them, they are by nature invasive. They are going to tell you, we're paying you millions of dollars. This is what we want. And what has also changed, besides the broadcast itself, is the owner. The owner used to be about the sport, the player, the team. You very rarely ever saw them on television. You very rarely ever saw them in the locker room. They were first and foremost fans. They had money, most of them. They didn't want to take the ego trip that you see today. You would never see pictures of Bob Kraft in his box, talking to Henry Kissinger or the president of Harvard or some other celebrity, Seiji Ozawa, the Boston Symphony at one time. You would never see it. They would shun that. You wouldn't see them on the field with celebrities. You wouldn't see them after the game hugging people. That's all out the window. And so the type of owner today is a business person. And that business person is going to listen when TV says, we're paying you, each one of your teams, $80, $100 million a year, something like that, for the league. We want the right to go in there. Now, in the past, they would say, too bad. You don't want the product, that's it. Now, the business people say, give me more and more and more, I'll deal with the coach. And now what you're really seeing is the invasion into other fields, if you want to talk about the future. COVID-19. Teams now have, for instance, the Patriots, you have to wear a bracelet that says, I'm vaccinated, or you have to wear a bracelet that says, I'm not vaccinated. You're told this year by the NFL, back to television, what the future might be. The players are being told, this ain't the real world. You're working for a company, which, by the way, I believe in. Either get vaccinated or don't show up for work. Or if you want to, the league has said, and there's an outbreak of COVID on your team, that if the game has to be canceled, you lose that game. We're not going to replay it like we did last year. And basically, you don't get a paycheck, and neither does the other team. Now, it's been a strong, whole thing of controversy. But what are we back to? Why are we there? We are there basically because it's about the money. They don't want to miss a game. The networks are saying to them, tough luck. You deal with that problem. We're paying you all this money, and if you don't, we begin to deduct it. So the tail is being wagged by the networks, and that's why I say sooner or later there'll be a game on Mars. Jeff Bezos will take teams to the moon, and you'll have a game on the moon, something like that. Sound futuristic? Sound crazy? Did you ever think? Did people think? I've lived since the late 30s. Did you think people thought that someday some team is getting $80 million to televise their game? My father couldn't get anybody to pay anything till almost the end. But it was the exposure. Now it's this. First and foremost, when this country was settled, I'm going back into the 16th, 17th, 18th century. Europeans, like the British, they brought their games to this country. The Scots brought their games to this country. But the origination of sport in this country was really the Native Americans, who essentially, going way, way back, played a version of lacrosse, and many played it with the heads of dead Native Americans because they believed that their spirit playing through a game that today is called lacrosse, that was the game, the way it was played. Now, in developing American sports, let's take baseball. During the Civil War, Abner Doubleday, who really discovered baseball, was basically organizing the game. In fact, in 1862, in the middle of the war, prisoners of the South, let's say, watch games, baseball games being played by the Northern soldiers, and sometimes participated in it. The America's pastime, as they called it, was essentially being played by the Union soldiers and Abner Doubleday. In fact, if you look at your history, a good friend of mine, Sidney Blumenthal, who is writing 6 volumes of the life of Lincoln, sent me a thing that's going to be in my book collection about Lincoln watching baseball being played on the front lawn of the White House. I don't know how many people know that, but that's where baseball came from. James Naismith invented basketball. And that was, with a big a blown ball, but he helped develop basketball. Football was really brought in as a form of rugby originally, but Walter Camp, who my grandfather served on the Walter Camp Rules Committee that actually negotiated with Teddy Roosevelt over what became the modern NCAA. Now, football then was played differently. My grandfather, John C. Bell Sr., played in the era in 1885 in a stocking cap and, a sweater and no protection. That was football. It was very, very brutal, but that was Walter Camp bringing in what originally was a rugby game and making it into football. So there have been games that have been brought over from Europe. We invented our own modern game of baseball. Football's an offshoot of rugby. Lacrosse, which is still played today, was brought to us by Native Americans. And, so we go along. Basketball was invented here. So these games became very popular, particularly baseball. And then football came in and actually revolutionized everything. The college game was the biggest right into the 50s, late 50s. And I remember when my father was trying to buy a franchise in the NFL in the 20s and then later in the 30s. His father was one of the richest men in Philadelphia, John C. Bell, who played in 1885, was part of the Walter Camp Rules Committee, said, Bert, I won't give you a nickel for the NFL. It's college football. That's where the game was. So as you went along, was not only that, but back to broadcasting, is people, especially 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, most famous names in America. Think of baseball: Red Barber, Mel Allen. You go right down. They were some of the most famous people in America. Football: Harry Wismer, Bill Stern. This is Bill Stern coming to you from Chicago, where Illinois will be playing Indiana today, but broadcast coast to coast. Notre Dame football. Where did you get the name Subway Alumni? Because their games were broadcast nationally. So it was radio that morphed into television, and then finally into the game itself. But baseball, basketball, football are American games that we're able to carry overseas and around the world. Now, as popular as the NFL is, the world sport really from America is basketball. The NBA is everywhere. They're playing in China. I've been to China and saw it back in the middle 80s, kids playing with peach baskets and everything else like that. And they knew it was an American game. So we have transported these sports to the other part of the world, and you can hear them in many different languages. But everything is moving so fast now that there are people out there right now, what you're talking about, and what is really important about this show and this series is to identify where we're going. And the big question is, too much information, what does that mean? What is it going to be good or not? Is there going to be enough mystery? And the most mysterious game is football. But a lot of mystery is being taken out of the game. So the future, we'll see, Michael. We'll see. It's coming, but we'll see. Got to be careful. Got to be very careful that you protect your game. Well, the first person who really made himself a personality bigger than the game was Howard Cosell. I mean, people tuned in Monday Night Football to hear him and Don Meredith, Dan DeRue, as they called him, and Frank Gifford, and hear Cosell make these outlandish, ridiculous statements. There's that young man down on the field. He's down. Oh, the NFL, they're just a bunch of jockocracies. I mean, people loved it. He was, even at one time in America, Howard Cosell was the most loved and hated at the same time. All the surveys. He became bigger than the game. Then there was John Madden. Oh, why did you see that guy going down the field? And beloved, character, bigger than life. Then you had, the announcers, the play-by-play. They were color people. The Madden became so big you couldn't believe it. and basically, then you had Al Michaels in one of the most famous statements made in 1980 at the end of the Olympics, the great American upset that's still remembered today. There's still guys like Mike Eruzione still making big fees to speak on that. Remember the end, we score, game's over. They follow, talking about television, they follow Jim Craig, the goalie, with the American flag draped around his shoulders, looking up in the stand for where's my father? You could read his lips, where's my father? His mother had just died, and he was looking for his father. And Al Michaels said the immortal words, do you believe in miracles? You can still hear it today, somewhere, that they're doing it. So those giants, even on radio, those giants people remember today, and particularly in baseball. My fear is that they're going to be required to do even more to keep people's interest up, because a lot of games, and I'm talking technically, a lot of games stink. I watch them all. And so you're going to be looking more and more for an entertainer. Give you for instance, Tony Romo, the ex-quarterback of the Dallas Cowboys. First year, everybody loved him, said things that most guys won't say, and explained things and everything else. The second year, he never shut up, and people turned the other way. Please tell him we like him. No more of that. Shut up. That's the real danger here. of the whole thing, that you're required to be a different type and get into it too much. I mean, I know at times I yell at the set, please shut up. Don't say anything more. Or please don't take me in the locker room. I don't want to hear an owner or some player saying something. Now that's me. Maybe people in their 20s and their 30s, they love all of that. And remember, as we know, uh, the people that they need to get, and that's true in talk radio or anything else, your demographic is like 20, maybe late 40s, maybe. That's what's killing baseball. The people who are watching and listening to baseball are 50 and up. That's not going to be the answer, and that's the danger to baseball. So it's in some ways chartered territory. You don't really know what's going to happen here, and it's still yet to be written. Or as Lawrence of Arabia told Sharif Ali, nothing is written, and that's the way I see it. Nothing is written. It is the grand experiment, and you can't control everything. So the other thing is, remember, the real play-by-play broadcast people now, I don't like it, are the players. I mean, after every play, I mean, they've got the mics down on the field. You can hear them say, "Oh, I took care of that guy," or he's throwing up his brand or whatever else it is. And I think that's a danger too. That as much as you like the showbiz and a different generation do, when does it come to a point? Particularly, you see these games where teams are being badly beaten, and yet the receiver or somebody else is pounding his chest or giving it this, and his team's behind by 30 points, and you're saying to yourself, turn that guy off. So the dangers are there, Michael. But you know what? When you're going into a brave new world, there are always dangers. Well, first and foremost, what you're describing is what I think is going to happen someday, 30, 40 years down the line. It's going to be robots. Because no human being that I know of, and I think I have a pretty quick mind that can quickly absorb anything. And the people who do it now have great minds. So by great minds for their sport and being able to look at everything. But what you're asking and what you're projecting, and I'm not saying it isn't going to be there, because I think it will be, but you're going to either have to decide that person or people, the play-by-play person, the color commentator, and I'm just talking about football right now, are basically either going to end up in narrow broadcasting with another element adding all of those other things. A voice, a robot voice, whatever else it is, that can be trained as to, when they see something on the field, that they will be able to add something or talk about statistics or stuff like that. Remember, one of the things that a play-by-play person, particularly in football, has to do is, first down and 10. It's third down and long yardage. 22 more yards to go. The wind's coming out of so-and-so. I mean, you really have to do that. And even faster moving sports, hockey, wow, hard to really do. Though some of those things of adding statistics and knowing where the first down marker is and everything else like that, that might have to be, I think, eventually punched up on your screen. That the person that's describing the game will be describing the game only. It's like what has happened, I think, which is a big mistake, to first down measurements. Was it a touchdown or not? Was it a first down? Did he get hit while he was on the ground? Was the ball a fumble or not? Now, that used to all be called by official. Then we came in with the instant replay. And then we came in with the league stepping in and having an observer. Now, all the major calls are called from New York in this big like war room. You love this. Uh, you talk about the future. In that room are all those monitors, games going on. And the minute the official comes over to it, I don't like this because it stops the game. And the game that used to be a 2.5 hour game now ends up being 3.5 hours, just like baseball. And there are coaches in the league now that would basically like to see them be able to challenge on every play instead of only giving you, I think it's 3 plays a half that you can challenge on. If you're wrong, admit. But now to me, you're making it too much of a board game. You're making it into something that I don't like. But you even see now that and they might have in the next Olympics. They have these professional, what do I call them? Leagues where people are actually like doing Madden football, except they have these different leagues, these video leagues, these gamers, they call them. So got to be really careful on using the tools that you have. But basically, you're getting into territory that is more futuristic and less realistic. I saw the drones, and they're essentially, I think drones can be used in certain ways, but what you have to be careful in sports is, people are always trying to steal signals. That, we've had more controversy about that, and there's ways to do it now and everything else like that. If let's say you put a drone over a stadium, there will be somebody who'll figure out how that drone can steal the opposing team's signals. The use of technology, I am all for. I mean, I've got every accoutrement that you can think of. Not that I know what I'm doing with most of them, but basically the real danger here is, and I believe what you say, for certain things, for pageantry, for showing. I mean, now you'll see more in all of the games. Hockey used to be the most difficult one to televise because they're moving so fast, hard to see the puck, hard to see when they score. All of that is really been great movements forward on that type of thing. But basically, when you do what you're talking about with the drones, they can be used for sporting events, certain things. Even the Super Bowl now, you can see from up above the pageantry that's going on, gives you a completely different picture. But if you start doing that, and I'm not saying people won't do that, because there's a Stephen Jobs around every corner and just waiting to pounce, and particularly in football, because it is a game now of technology. They're trying to find every which way. But I say again, you've got to tread lightly. There are many ways. For instance, now, used to be after each game, you would wait for the film to be developed. Next day, the team would get the film. The offense and the defense would see what they did the day before, and then they prepare with another film that they get from the other team in to get ready for it. Now, the game is being shot. That's on your computer. The minute you get on the plane, most players are watching the game that they just played on their computer, and the coaches are already studying for the future. So all of that stuff is hurry up. And there are a lot of techniques that they're using now. But here's an interesting concept. Football is still a game of you have to hit somebody. It's a game of hit or being hit. I mean, you can't get away from it. But what has happened is, with so much technology, so much more medical advancements, everything that we're seeing happening, except how to cure CTE, which I think is impossible, is that basically the players hit less in training camp, they play more games, but they're not to be going into the season really prepared like they used to be hit or to block, to tackle, all of those things. And a lot of it is due, A, to technology, and B, to the game is evolving where they don't want their players hurt because they play so many games. But I've always said it, if you're not used to being hit, you're not used to being scrimmaging, you will get injured a lot faster. So again, it's the push pull of technology, and I think where it is so interesting is how does it make the sport or the event better, but also how can it affect it negatively? So we can put it on our watch. We've got it on our phone. We've got it on our computer. We have the technology to show the play in many different ways. We have the technology for the fan to be able to vote, I would have called this play or not. Then what do we have in the end? What is there? What 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 is the mystery? Here's what's happened to baseball. Baseball with Michael Lewis, who wrote the book and again the movie, on showing people how with certain percentages you could still be a decent team. You didn't have to hit home runs. It'd be better to get walks, get on bases, all of the different things you could do. Now what has happened to baseball, it has become a game, as I call it, of the nerds. They're the analytics people. There are more damn analytics people. The Red Sox have, I think, 22 people in the analytics department. And what it has become is, and it's really beginning, I think, to turn people off, is it used to be a 2.5 hour game. Now it's 4 hours. The strategy is either strikeout or home run. No more walks. You can shift and take, somebody who's a left-handed hitter totally out of the game. And as far as I'm concerned, it's boring. And what has happened is because the manager who used to operate like the coach on hunches, I know the game, I understand it. Now it's become that every day somebody from the nerd department, as I call it, come down and hand him a printout. This is what it is. These are all the tendencies, all the things that we're talking about now. And they've taken the feel out of the game. In the end, whether it's an interview you're doing with me, whether it's me talking about certain subjects, it's a feel. It's an I understand anything that I've studied that somebody asked me, basically. But the other part that I think that I bring to it is I have a feel for it. I have an understanding of it. And this is where we get back to broadcasting. You get back to the analytics part of it. Well, is the game better? You can put drones up over Fenway Park. You can dress it up beautifully. You can have Jerry Remy and Dennis Eckersley. They're great. They can have all that small talk. And I'm going to myself, the game started 7, it's now midnight. The hell with this. That's what I say. You have to be careful. And the same way in football, too. We've got technology. So Sunday afternoon at 1, Sunday afternoon at 4, Sunday night at 8, Monday night at 8, Thursday night. Too much. Technology can't solve that problem. Too much. Then when you get into November and December, Saturday games. And one more game added to it. 17 games. Technology can do everything for you, but it can't keep your interest. He would like the speed because he was way ahead of his time. He understood speed. He could see way ahead of time. I was telling somebody the other day that he made more moves than Bobby Fischer could. He was the great chess master. He understood years ahead television was going to be big. He understood equalizing of the schedule and competition. He understood communications. He understood all of the things that would drive his league forward in his game. He was, to me, he could have run any business because he had that intelligence, but he also had a feel. I think he would like the speed of what's happening, understanding it's inexorable. You're not going to stop it. He would not like the analytics. He would, because you would, he would see what it could do to the game. They, by the way, I remember the last year on a Dallas Cowboy telecast, and the coach of the Cowboys, it was like 3rd and 1. Now I can tell you a lot about 3rd and 1s and 4th and 1s and goal line stands, as it is in the game and in life, where somebody comes to you in life and says, Michael, you got 5 minutes to decide what you're going to do here. Are you going to take the job, or you're not going to take the job? Are you going to go ahead with the interview this way or that way? You got to make that decision. So the announcer comes on and said, Coach at Dallas, it's 3rd and 1. He says he's going to use analytics. And by the way, the Colts use it too. And I said, for Christ's sake, you know what? This is not called for analytics, because in baseball, it's a little bit different. In football, there's no real, you can use all the statistics, but 3rd and 1 is 3rd and 1. If you have a better offensive line than the other team has a defensive line, you are going to make the first down. If you don't, you can have all the analytics that will say 60% of the time on 3rd down, you can make it. And I was right. They didn't make it. They didn't make it because they lost the intelligence of the game and went to a computer. Can't do it. Well, he would definitely take into effect the first 2. And it's interesting. I had a conversation back in 1964 with Tex Schramm of the Dallas Cowboys, who was their general manager, and actually was the person that brought computers into scouting with Gil Brandt. And I said, what do you see in the future? And this 1963. He said, Upton, I see the day where stadiums are only going to hold 20,000 people, and most of them will be people who will buy huge boxes and are there to enjoy it as a social outing, and the rest will all be television. That was 1963. And basically what he was saying is really true and relates back to this. I see that essentially, remember, the owners then, although they're beginning to get the multimillionaires into it, theirs was all about survival. Theirs was about a love of the game. Theirs was not about how much money I can make. Theirs was, we can make enough to pay the players and survive as a league. That was really important to them. Bert Bell would have liked the first 2. What he wouldn't have liked about the analytics, now if the analytics translated into where is the game going, its technology and stuff like that, that's one thing. But he would not like, and here's the one thing that made him such a power that you'll never see again as a commissioner. He was a college quarterback, threw the first pass in Rose Bowl history. He was an NFL owner, coach, and commissioner. He's the only one ever in the history of sport that did all of it. So he understood it from a player standpoint, an owner's standpoint, a coach's standpoint, because he was a coach also. What he wouldn't have liked is the use of analytics in calling plays in the game itself. There's certain parts of the game, no matter what you can do, there's nothing you can do when it's 3rd and 1 or you're on the goal line. You either make it or you don't. It's the greatest comparison to life. Either you do it or you don't. He wouldn't have liked the idea that somebody said, well, you know what? 8 out of 10 times you make it on the goal line. That he wouldn't have liked. And I think also that you talk about the broadcasters, the improvement, the technology, and everything else like that. It's interesting to me right now. There are a lot of sharp coaches in the NFL, but outside of Belichick and a few others, I don't think there are a lot of great coaches in the NFL. They have all the technology, they have everything, but there's that element to that game. And that's why the people watch sports, whether it's football, basketball, hockey. And the element is you never know. Or as Bert Bell said, and his biography, on any given Sunday. Now there are there are already computer chips in players' uniforms to test how fast during a game, how fast that receiver can get downfield in a certain amount of time. There are certain there are things in the player's helmet. And here's my warning about the brave new world. And that basically is that, Tom Brady's being called the greatest quarterback of all time. And I would consider him in the thing. Do you know, since high school, he's never called a play in his life? Never. So he's never had to make a decision. Now, he's perfectly capable of doing it. He's very, very bright. But technology has taken that away from him. The linebacker who calls the defensive plays never called a play in his life. I warn people, unlike the Tesla, when you take that human element out of the game, you don't have a game. And we're really getting close to that now. They're bigger, they're better, they're faster, they're stronger. But I remember in the game when the Patriots were down 31-3 or 28-3 in the Super Bowl. And there was this key play where a receiver was to go down and break it out, a short breakout in one of their key drives that would, keep them in the game. And you're 10 seconds before the play is called, they have to turn off the helmet. They turn the technology off, Lig does, in the helmet. And one of the coaches is yelling into Brady's ear, he's got to go deeper. He's got to go deeper and make that cut. Well, that's all well and good. And the guy went deeper and made the call. But what you've done is you've taken away from the quarterback what he used to do and know. What made Unitas great? What made Elway, Marino, all of these guys great? And I'm not saying these players are not great. They had to think. 2-minute drives. One of the most famous drives, two in history. John Elway's drive against Cleveland to bring his team back to win when it looked like all hope was over. John Unitas, 2 minutes left in a dusty, dirty Yankee Stadium, and you can see in the film where Raymond Berry, the great receiver, is made a cut that's too short, and you can see Unitas on film going like this, down further. We need the first down. Well, that was the element of the game that you want, and that's the element with all the technology. I like most of it. You're going to lose.
Read Present at the Creation to delve deeper into what has been discussed here and to learn more about Upton Bell's exciting career. He looks back in history, ruminates on the present, and intuits the future in sports and American culture. His professional life spans decades, and Present at the Creation chronicles his compelling adventures.